Good day. My name is Vincent Louie Lawas and I'm the first reporter. Chapter 8 Survey Research Characterizing a Broader Population. In this chapter, we will discuss the following: the utility of survey research, how to plan, pre-test, and conduct a survey, the characteristics of good survey questions, how to design a survey questionnaire, and lastly, how to choose an appropriate survey methodology. Public opinion surveys have become an important part of our social and political life. Kung gusto ta makabalo o sige huna-una sa kadaghanan, surveys can provide the necessary information na dili nato makuha sa pag-istorya lang sa atong amigo or pagpaminaw sa mga political figures. So only survey based on representative samples reliably shows what the public truly thinks, and acceptance of this fact has made survey research one of the most extensively used of social science methods. For example, when people try to gauge which political candidate might win an election, we rely on survey research or polls. This chapter provides an outline or overview on how this is done. Survey research is a method of data collection in which information is obtained directly from individual persons who are selected to provide a basis for drawing conclusions about some larger populations. Information collected in surveys may be obtained either by direct questioning through face-to-face or telephone interviews, or by having the subject complete a mailed or self-administered questionnaires. Online surveys administered through internet offer another common way of measuring the public opinion. Those who answer survey questions are generally referred to as respondents. Survey provide 5 types of information about the respondents. They are facts, perceptions, opinions, attitudes, and behavioral reports. Facts include background characteristics such as age, occupation, and place of residence. Perceptions are statements of what individuals know or think they know about the world, such as the names of the public officials or the national government's policy regarding the trade with China. Opinions are statements of people's current preferences or judgments about events and objects. Such questions as: do you favor legalization of marijuana, and whom do you want to win in the upcoming presidential election? Attitudes are relatively stable evaluation of and orientation toward events, objects, and ideas. For example, if we want to know about people's support for civil liberties or government regulations of the economy, we are asking about the attitudes on which specific opinions are often based. Lastly, behavioral reports are simply statements of how people act. Stages of survey process. Next, we will discuss the survey research process. Survey research can be divided into 14 basic activities. Step 1. Conceptualizing. In this stage, a general research question is reduced to a far more specific set of questions that can be addressed through empirical investigation. In this stage, we will specify the purpose of our research, develop hypotheses, we clarify the concepts, and we operationalize the concepts through survey questions. Next step, survey design. In this step, we establish the procedures to be used and decide on the general nature of the sample to be drawn. Most surveys are exploratory, descriptive, or explanatory in purpose. Exploratory surveys help us acquire information to use in formulating research questions and hypotheses more precisely. Descriptive surveys provide precise measurements of variables that may be important in theorizing, but provide no basis for making causal inferences. Explanatory surveys test causal hypotheses and help us understand observed patterns in terms of a theory. Explanatory surveys also must be designed so as to allow us to rule out alternative rival hypotheses. Next, we must select the way to organize the survey. The basic choice is between cross-sectional and longitudinal design. In cross-sectional surveys, data are collected from respondents only once. In longitudinal surveys, data are collected from respondents on more than one occasion. Next, we choose the type of surveys. The basic choice among the type of surveys is usually among 4 options. 1. Personal interviews. 2nd. mail surveys, third, telephone surveys, and lastly, internet surveys. Personal interviews is one of the most flexible of survey methods because it allows the use of a variety of questioning techniques such as visual aids and gives interviewees a chance to pursue questions in order to ensure proper and appropriate responses. Mail surveys are a good alternative to personal interviews and offer several advantages because mail surveys cost much less to produce and larger samples can be drawn and a wider distribution of the instrument can be achieved. Telephone surveys kay natunga siya between in-person and mail surveys in many ways. The number of questions can be asked is generally larger than for mail instruments but shorter than for personal interviews. And the last type of surveys is the internet surveys, which usually are administered through email, web pages, or a combination of both. They have become a standard research tool in government, business, academia, and the mass media. The next step in survey research is instrumentation. In this step, we draft the questions and other items that will appear on the survey instrument and planning the format of that instrument, as well as designing any visual aids or other devices that will be used. The fourth step is planning. Here we develop methods of managing the surveys and anticipating the equipment and personnel that will be needed. Fifth, sampling. In this step, we select the persons to be interviewed according to the method that best fits the purposes and resources of the given study. This is the end of the first part of the report. Thank you all for listening.
Hello everyone, this is the continuing part of the survey research characterizing a voter population. So, what we will be tackling in this topic is the training or briefing, pre-testing, surveying, monitoring, and verifying. So, I will give you few definitions of the terms. So, training or briefing. So, preparing interviews, coders, or other personnel to properly contact respondents and administer the instrument to them. We also have pre-testing, so it is administering the instrument to a smaller sample similar to the larger sample. Number 3 is we have surveying, administering the instrument to members. Number 4, we have monitoring, so it is ensuring that proper persons are being contacted to become respondents. And lastly, we have verifying, it's using follow-up contacts to make sure that interviews have actually been performed. So we have here number 1, training or briefing. So it is preparing interviews, coders, or other personnel to properly conduct respondents and administer the instrument to them. So, personal interview is simultaneously one of the worst and one of the best data collection tools available to social scientists. So, the most significant disadvantages of the interview stem from the fact that the interview situation is rich with opportunities for reactivity to affect measurement. So, respondents' reaction to appearances or behavior of the interviewer to the wording of questions or to the interview setting can create artificial data that contain less information about the real world than about the interview process itself. So, interviews must be standardized. So, what does this mean? So, each question should mean the same thing to each respondent, and that each response must mean the same thing when given by different respondents. So, the presence of an interviewer ideally should never ever affect the respondent's perception of a question nor the kind of answer that is given. So, here we also have what to do. So, achieving this requirement, requires interview training. So the following guidelines should help to reduce interviewer error considerably. Use an informal conversational style. Use an informal conversational style when asking the question. When asking the questions in the survey, you should act as if there was no reason to expect people to refuse to answer. We have here to be sufficiently familiar with the questions so that you sound as if you are not reading them. Do not conduct the interview in a monotonous voice that might affect make your sound disinterested in the respondent's answer. So, make the respondents feel like you are listening to what they say. So, try to make the respondents feel that you are listening to what they say by using affirmations such as I see, or okay. Do not express your own opinion during an interview by showing agreement or disagreement with the respondent. So please remain neutral and never suggest answers to the respondents even if you think you know what the respondent is trying to say. So do not allow yourself to be drawn into conversations with the respondent about the subject of the survey because the remarks or your remarks might bias the response. We have here, let the respondents determine the speed at which you read the survey. So do not move too fast, but avoid dragging the interview so that the respondents become frustrated. So we also have here, be prepared to answer any questions. This is your job, that you have to answer any question the respondents ask you about who is doing the survey and why. So each study should have a sheet prepared by the project manager that provides brief answers to these questions. We have here what to do. We also have here what we should not do. Okay, so do not alter the wording or the order of items. So survey results can be distorted when questions are reworded or questions are asked out of sequence. We also have here, do not attempt to interview from memory. Always have the questioner before you and refer it for question and order even if it takes only a glance to remind you of the items. Record respondents' comments in exactly the words the respondents used. Do not summarize. However, if respondents give indefinite answers, probe for more specific responses. In well-constructed surveys, appropriate probes are indicated on the questionnaire for any question that is likely to require them. Next, do not accept don't know or no opinion as a response without at least repeating the question and offering a little encouragement, such as, I know some of the questions might be difficult to answer, but what is your best guess? Do not defend the survey instrument. If respondents object to the question or to the wordings, or the alternative answers offered, do not defend the survey instrument, but merely explain that you must ask the questions as written and that you are not responsible for them. Next we have, or the last we have, never tell respondents what others have answered because as we all know, this might really bias the response to the survey. So next we have pre-testing. So what is pre-testing? Pre-testing means that administering the instrument to a small sample similar to the larger sample to be conducted to ensure that instructions can be correctly interpreted and that respondents can clearly understand the questions. So pre-tests are conducted by administering the survey to a small sample of respondents similar to those who will be in the larger sample. So pre-test is as much a test of the sampling technique as it is a test of the survey instrument. So pre-testing, what does it really do? So what does pre-testing do? What does it do is that it ensures that members of all groups of respondents that may react differently to the instrument be included in the pre-test. Pre-test can serve both to verify the utility of an instrument in which the researcher has a good deal of confidence and to help in the development of an instrument when the researcher knows less about the phenomena under study. Lastly, we have here pre-testing is, we know that pre-testing is really costly and time-consuming, but it is an absolutely essential investment because without it, the researcher risks producing useless or misleading data. Next, we have here surveying. So, it was said that it is the heart of study because it is where the data are actually collected. Although researchers generally prefer to use face-to-face interviews for longer surveys or questionnaires that contain sensitive topics, personal interviews can be difficult to conduct in certain areas, in high-crime neighborhoods or extremely rural areas, for example, and usually take much longer to complete than telephone surveys. So I have here an example of an interview survey that is through telephone, but this one is much better actually. It is called computer-assisted telephone interviewing. So what is CATE. So, computer-assisted telephone interviewing or CATE systems consist of a battery of network computers that are controlled by a server that controls and displays the interview schedule on each interviewer's computer screen, selects telephone numbers, and dials them automatically for the interview. So, here are some of the advantages of CATE. First is that it increases the efficiency and accuracy of surveys because the CATE program automatically guides the interview through the questions and records. It records responses as they are entered, reducing the possibility of interviewer error. Here we also have second, the CATE systems allow survey organizations to administer very complex and individualized interview schedules. So, based on responses to previous questions, for example, CATE can adjust the interview schedule and skip over questions not intended for certain respondents. This is called question branching. So, third, CATE systems are able to monitor and conduct interviewers obtrusively during the interview. So researchers can listen in on any interview at any time to catch and correct interviewers' mistake. So interviewers who make errors can be retained or pulled entirely from the study. So fourth, we have here most CATE systems featured integrated statistical software packages that allow instant analysis of the survey data, thus eliminating the need to reformat and then export data into other statistical programs. And finally, we have here integrated text editors enable researchers to write, test, and revise questionnaires easily and quickly within CATE, so thus reducing the time needed between the development and implementation of new survey schedule. We also here have monitoring. So what is monitoring? Monitoring. So it is ensuring that the proper persons are being contacted to become respondents and by checking on the administration of instrument. So surveys are monitored to ensure that validity and generalizability of results. So check the completed interview schedules to determine whether with personal surveys, monitoring is done principally through a debriefing session as interviewers return from the field. The researchers or a trusted assistant should check the completed interview schedule to determine whether the correct people in the correct households have been interviewed. All completed interview schedules have been returned. Each instrument fully identifies the respondent and provides information on the time and date of the interview. Each instrument contains an identification number for the respondents for the interviewer. And lastly, all refusals are explained and are any outstanding callbacks have been made. All of these helps ensure proper sampling and assists in verification. We're down to verifying. So what does it mean in research? So using follow-up contacts to make sure that interviews have actually been performed. Verification of personal interviews usually involves contacting the intended respondents to determine whether the interview has occurred and whether the interviewer has asked and correctly recorded answers to all questions. So to do this, ask when the interview occurred and approximately how long it took. If respondents report that the interview has been conducted, ask them to re-answer two simple questions, one from the middle and one from near the end end of the questionnaire. Under the pretext that the answers were not clearly recorded in the field, then check their answers against those that were recorded. In large surveys, verification is done on a spot check because contacting all respondents would be too costly. Secondary analysis of survey data. So what does it mean? So studying data collected by someone else is called secondary analysis. So secondary analysis allows fuller use of data and conserves resources by saving the cost of new surveys when sufficient data already exists. Surveys run the risk of contaminating the population. So this means that repeated studies of some subjects among a population may actually cause changes in the phenomena in question or make people reluctant to operate with future research by allowing research to be conducted without yet another survey. So secondary analysis minimizes the risk of contamination. So although many data analysis techniques were available to political scientists, any one researcher is likely to use only a few in a single study. Secondary analysis allows other researchers to apply different techniques that may expand our understanding of the subject or may even produce different answers to the original research question. Now we're down to practical research ethics. So how should we protect survey respondents? So the fact that survey researchers ask individuals to talk about their personal attitudes, opinions, and beliefs requires them to be especially sensitive to the possible consequences of their questions. In general, researchers need to protect respondents from harm and ensure that all survey findings are reported accurately. The following ethical considerations should be observed carefully when conducting studies. Respondents' right to know. Survey respondents should provide their permission to be interviewed, affirming that their participation in the survey is voluntarily and that they do not have to answer all questions. In addition, respondents should have enough information about the purpose of the study, the funding organization, and the organization that conducts the survey to make an informed decision about their participation. So, respondents' right to protection. Researchers have obligation to ensure that the survey questions do not cause physical or emotional harm to the respondents. So, this includes practices or methods that may humiliate or mislead survey respondents. Researchers should also consider whether their questions might have any legal consequences for the respondents. For example, workers participating in a survey that was sanctioned by their employer. So, respondents also have the right to privacy. So, survey respondents do not have to answer questions that they consider too personal or private. So, respondents' right to confidentiality and anonymity unless formally waived by the respondent by specific uses. So, survey researchers are obliged to ensure that the information provided by the respondents will be kept private or confidential and anonymous. So, accurate reporting of results. So, survey researchers must make an effort to fully and accurately represent the data gathered by the survey. So, AAPOR's Code of Professional Ethics and Practices specifies that survey reports must include the following information: who sponsored the conducted survey, the exact wording of questions asked, definition of the population and the sampling frame, description of the sample design, sample sizes, eligibility criteria, screening procedures, and response rates. They should estimate the estimates of sampling, error, and the description of any weighting or estimating procedures used, which results are based on only parts of the sample and method, location, and dates of data collection. So that would be all. Thank you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.